Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In today's video, we are going to add the next 20 creature cards with a CMC of 4 into our Momir Vig Cube. What's up, MTG That is the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another installment of our ongoing Momir Vig Cube series. If you need a refresher, or you're not quite sure what the goals or purposes of this series are, you can search in the description below for a link to MTG Burgeoning's introduction to the Momir Vig Cube. And while you're fishing down there, you can also click the link to Cube Cobra, where you can see the entire contents of the cube as they stand right now. So we got 20 creature cards with CMCs of 4, and we are going to start off with Leyline Tyrant. 4/4 Flying Dragon. We don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end. That could be game-changing if you have those mountain lands in your library. Because when Leyline Tyrant dies, you may pay any amount of red mana, and when you do, it deals that much damage to any target. So if you are continuously pumping in this red mana and allowing it to build and build and build, not only does it give you the advantage of using it to further your creature summoning way ahead of curve, you can also use it as the ultimate right to your face to the opponent when Leyline Tyrant dies. And that comes on the body of a 4/4 flyer, which in a format that's based on creatures, having that evasion is going to be very, very favorable. Creature number 2, and an old school edition here, we have Liege of the Hollows, a 3/4 spirit. When Liege of the Hollows dies, each player may pay any amount of mana, and when they do, they put that number of squirrel creature tokens onto the battlefield under their control. They are 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens. This is just going to create all kinds of, let's say, sideways shenanigans, because you want to make sure you've got some mana up if Liege of the Hollows dies, but you don't want to fall too far behind when summoning token copies from the Momir Vig Cube of any of the creatures you're able to do so. Liege of the Hollows is going to create a lot of guesswork when it's on the battlefield. Next up, we have Liliana's Reaver. We got a 4/3 zombie with Death Touch, and when this deals combat damage to a player, that player will discard a card, and we will create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So let's look at this creature here for a moment. By forcing our opponent to discard a card, we rob them the ability to build their mana base. But more importantly, we rob their ability to potentially use that card to discard when they summon a token copy from one of the creatures in the Momir Vig Cube. Because each time we summon a creature, you have to discard a card from your hand. So it may be one of those instances in which Liliana's Reaver is just chump blocked for days, which, let's be honest, is just going to be beneficial for us because that opponent is going to fall behind on their creature count. If by any chance our opponent allows Liliana's Reaver to hit and we force that opponent to discard a card, we also get to create that 2/2 zombie, which should not be overlooked because in a format where creatures are everything and there are no instants or sorcery spells, any creatures that can create creatures are highly coveted because of what they can do. Creature number 4 is Living Tsunami, a 4/4 flying elemental. When at the beginning of our upkeep, we have to sacrifice this creature unless we return a land we control to our hand. So you're really going to have to gauge the board here. Is it worth keeping a 4/4 flyer on the battlefield to bring a land back to your hand? And from advantageous purposes, that land could be used to help summon another creature from the Momir Vig Cube if you so choose to discard it. If that is, of course, you have no other lands in your hand. Living Tsunami is going to be one of those creatures that, well, let's be honest, is not going to be one of the most useful or helpful or powerful creatures in the cube, but that's one of the themes that's woven in to the Momir Vig Cube. Creature number 5 is a colorless addition. It is Lockjaw Snapper. It's a 2/2 scarecrow with the Wither ability, which means it will deal damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. So there is no healing step when we send a Lockjaw Snapper into combat. Any damage that is dealt to a creature from this creature will be in -1/-1 counters. There is no cleanup step or healing there, folks. And when Lockjaw Snapper dies, we put a -1/-1 counter on each creature with a -1/-1 counter on it. So we can send this bad boy into combat and just see how our opponents react to it, or we can hold it back for defensive purposes too. Either way, Lockjaw Snapper is going to provide its summoner with some some options to think about. Our second consecutive colorless creature and another artifact creature, it's going to be Lodestone Mirror. 2/2 Mirror. We can tap an untapped artifact we control to give this +1/+1 till end of turn. No, there are no straight artifacts in the Momir Vig Cube. However, there are a number of artifact creatures. If you are fortunate enough to have multiple ones on your side of the battlefield, you may be able to make Lodestone Mirror's power and toughness a little bit bigger just by tapping them. Creature number 6, our first mono white edition. We are going to talk about Luminous Guardian, a 1/4 Guardian that we can pay a white mana to give it +0/+1 until end of turn. So we can increase its toughness temporarily by adding by pumping white mana into it. We can also pay 2 mana and have Luminous Guardian block an additional creature this turn. However, it doesn't say that you can only use that ability 1 time per turn. So with enough mana available, you could really put the kibosh on numerous attackers trying to make our life total tick too low, down and close to 0, because of Momir Vig, we only start with 24 life. Creature number 7 in our second mono blue edition, it is Luzun. I'm going to say that's Zune, I think. Scholar General, 1/3 human soldier with horsemanship. We're going way back to the days of Portal when we're talking about horsemanship. This creature can't be blocked except by creatures with horsemanship. Let's be honest, those creatures are not a dime a dozen. So for the purposes of the Momir Vig Cube, Luzun is going to be unblockable. And whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, we're going to draw a card, which is just going to help further our board state by giving us more lands to play and more lands to discard in order to summon those creatures from the Momir Vig Cube. Creature number 9 in our first multicolored edition, it is Master Biomancer. We have a 2/4 elf wizard. Each other creature we control enters the battlefield with a number of additional +1/+1 counters on it equal to Master Biomancer's power, and is a mutant in addition to its other types. Now, it's not impossible to buff the power of Master Biomancer. There are many +1/+1 there is a +1/+1 counter strategy woven into this deck. Plus, it is an elf, and there are elf lords. So there is a way in which that we can throw around these +1/+1 counters more than just 2 each time a creature enters our battlefield. And if that's the case, I venture to guess that it's only a matter of time until we end up winning that game. All right, hitting the halfway point of this video, and we're going to have our second mono green creature to talk about. Master of the Wild Hunt, a 3/3 human shaman. At the beginning of our upkeep, we create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. So this creature is just going to give us a 2/2 at the beginning of each one of our turns. That in and of itself is enough to just hold it back from combat and allow the 2/2s to amass or to utilize them defensively for the purposes of chump blocking our opponent's creatures. As an additional ability, Master of the Wild Hunt can be tapped, and then when we do that, we tap all untapped wolf creatures we control, and then each wolf tapped this way will deal damage to its power. Will deal damage equal to its power to target creature, and then that creature will deal damage equal to its power divided as its controller chooses among any number of the wolves that were used to tap. So in a way, in a very long-winded way, Master of the Wild Hunt provides the ability to fight some of our opponent's creatures. Well, one at a time, of course. All of our wolves will have to commit, but this does give us the avenue for some creature removal. And in a format like Momir Vig, where it's all about creatures and there are no instants or sorcery spells, any creature that can provide an avenue of removal could be powerful enough to tip the scale of the game in its summoner's favor. All right, next creature, starting off the second half of this video, we have Master of Waves. We have a 2/1 Merfolk Wizard that has protection from red, so right off the bat, we're talking about some evasion. Elemental creatures we control get +1/+1. Interesting, because Master of Waves has a nice sneaky block of text right under elemental creatures we control get +1/+1. And that is, when it ETBs, we're going to create a number of 1/0 blue elemental creature tokens equal to our devotion to blue. So minimally, when Master of Waves hits the field, we're going to get 1/0 blue elemental creature that gets +1/+1 from Master of Waves. If we're fortunate enough to have some other creatures with blue mana symbols in their casting cost, then Master of Waves just gets better and better. Because the more blue mana symbols equal more 1/0 blue elemental creatures that Master of Waves buffs by +1/+1. So let's say, for example, we've got Living Tsunami out there, which is 2 and 2 blue mana. We get Master of Waves. It comes down, it's going to create 3 of those blue elemental creature tokens. So just by summoning Master of Waves, we get a 2/1 Merfolk, and then we get 3 2/1 blue elemental creature tokens. Again, very similar to what we were talking about with Master of the Wild Hunt. Any creature that can create additional creatures is highly valuable in a format like Momir Vig. All right, creature number 12, another mono blue creature, another Merfolk creature. We have Merfolk Sea Stalkers, 2/3 with Island Walk. We can pay 2 and a blue mana to tap target creature without flying. That Island Walk is just another form of evasion, and if your opponents have an island for us to walk all over, we're going to send Merfolk Sea Stalkers into combat, and it will not be able to be blocked. The tap target creature without flying could really come into play during the mid to late portions of the game as we move closer and closer to winning the game with our creatures by tapping down our opponent's creatures. Just make sure, MTGBC, you need some blue mana to do that, so make sure those islands are in your basic land deck. Our next creature is another mono blue creature, and it is another Merfolk. This time, Merfolk Sky Scout, a 2/3 with flying, and whenever Merfolk Sky Scout attacks or blocks, we get to untap target permanent. So if we send this bad boy into combat, we can untap one of our creatures that's also attacking, giving it some form of pseudo-vigilance. It's still in combat and attacking, but it is untapped. Ending the run of our mono blue Merfolk, we have Mindless Automaton. It's a construct, and it's going to enter the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. We're going to pay 1 mana. We're going to discard a card to put a +1/+1 counter on this. Then we can remove 2 +1/+1 counters from it to draw a card. So there's a lot of +1/+1 shenanigans on it. Is it worth it? Well, I don't know. It could be a mana sink, but it does cost us a card each time we do that, and we need those cards in order to discard it to summon those creatures from the Momir Vig Cube. Removing 2 +1/+1 counters on it to draw a card could be beneficial somewhere down the line. However, we're investing 4 mana to summon a token copy of this creature, and if the best we get is another land in our hand just by removing the 2 +1/+1 counters, well then Mindless Automaton is going to fall into that example of the creatures included in this cube that are not overpowered or overuseful. Reaching the 3/4 mark of this video, we have Mirrorwood Treefolk, a 2/4 that we can pay 2 in Boros colors, and the next time damage would be dealt to Mirrorwood Treefolk this turn, that damage is dealt to target creature or player instead. So that is going to be something that can be extraordinarily useful, particularly in a game that's governed particularly in a format that's governed by combat. As long as you've got the red and white mana available to you, you send Mirror Tree Folk into combat, and let's see if your opponent even attempts to block it. Because if the opponent can't chump block it and tries to kill it, we're going to prevent that damage and deal that damage to one of their creatures to get rid of them from the battlefield, or straight to their face to tick their life total down southward even further from 24, getting closer and closer to 0. And even if they so do chump block it, maybe we want to do that anyways as a way in which to speed up their demise. Alright, the last 5 of this video, and we're going back to mono red. This time it's going to be Mondronin Shaman, a 3/2 human werewolf shaman. At the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast since last turn, transform Mondronin Shaman. And when we transform this 3/2, we do so and get a 5/5. And whenever an opponent casts a spell, Tovolar's Mage Hunter will deal 2 damage to that player. At the beginning of each upkeep, if a player casts 2 or more spells last turn, transform Tovolar's Mage Hunter. So let's unwrap this creature here for a moment. Let's flip it back. It seems highly likely that this may never be able to transform, because in Momir Vig, you want to get, minimally, you want to get your creature onto the battlefield so that you can engage in combat. You can only summon 1 creature per turn. So if Mondronin Shaman is on our side of the battlefield, and our opponents consistently cast spells, we will never be able to transform this, unless we decide to take a turn off and not summon a creature from the cube. So there's always that thought, because the upside of transforming Mondronin Shaman into Tovolar's Mage Hunter, it's enough to skip that turn, because then for the investment of 4 mana, we get a 5/5 that will never transform back, because you cannot cast 2 or more spells in a turn in Momir Vig. It's maximum 1 summoning from the cube per turn. So if we can get Tovolar's Mage Hunter to transform, we will always have a 5/5 that will deal a shock to that player. I'm sorry, not a shock, that will deal 2 damage to each. Let me say that again. We will have a 5/5 that will deal 2 damage to a player each time they summon a creature from the Momir Vig Cube. So even if our opponents do not skip summoning a creature from the cube, it may be worth skipping our turn summoning one in order to transform this into the other side of the creature being Tovolar's Mage Hunter. That 5/5 for 4 and dealing 2 damage to the face each time our opponents summon a creature, that really could be game ending. It might be worth it just skipping a creature being summoned that turn. Okay, so let's move forward. We've got creature number 17 here, back to mono green. We have Mungo Worm. It's a 6/5 for the investment of 4 mana on a mono green creature, so you know the drawback is going to be pretty steep. And that is, we can't untap more than 1 land during our untap step. So is that going to be worth it? A 6/5? It's way ahead of curve on a 4 drop. Again, this is one of those examples of a creature that may not be overly useful or welcomed in the Momir Vig Cube. Creature number 18, we're back to another colorless edition. This time it's Mir Quadrupod, a 1/4 Mir that we can pay 3 mana to switch its power and toughness until end of turn. This could cause some combat headaches for our opponents if we decide to turn it sideways, send it into combat, and have at least 3 mana up. Creature number 19, another mono red edition, and that's going to be Neheb Dreadhorde Champion. Here we have a 5/4 zombie minotaur warrior with trample, and whenever Neheb deals combat damage to a player, we're just going to skip over or planeswalker part because there are no planeswalkers in Momir Vig. So whenever Neheb deals combat damage to a player, we may discard any number of cards. And if we do, we draw that many cards and add that much red mana to our mana pool. Until end of turn, we don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So the best way I can fathom exploiting Neheb if he's on our side of the battlefield We get to our turn, we draw our card. We do not summon a creature from the cube. We send Neheb with his 5/4 trample into combat, hopefully towards an opponent where we know Neheb will either be sure to survive and be sure to deal some combat damage. So as long as we can get 1 point as long as we can get 1 point of combat damage into our opponent, and then we can make sure that Neheb will also survive, we'll get that point in, and then we discard every single card in our hand. However many cards that is, we discard them all. We draw that many because we're still just drawing lands. We're discarding lands to draw lands. Then we'll get that red mana. That red mana will be there for us after our combat. So the red mana is sitting there. We jam that red mana and tap every single one of our untapped lands into our Momir Vig Avatar, and we summon the biggest creature we possibly could. So let's say this is turn 5, and we summoned Neheb on turn 4. So let's say we've got 4 lands in our hand. We turn Neheb sideways, send him into combat. We do get 1 point of combat damage, and Neheb will survive. That's perfect. We discard all 4 of those cards. We draw 4 lands. We add 4 red mana to our mana pool. We get to our turn. We play our 5th land for the turn. We tap those 5 lands. I'm sorry, we tap 4 of those 5 lands. We use all 4 red mana, and we summon a creature from the Momir Vig Cube out of the 8 tier, which is 8's CMC or higher on turn 5. Neheb could end up stealing the game for us if we manage combat appropriately to exploit his mana production. Whew, that was a lot for Neheb. All right, Creature 20 bringing this video to a close. We have Night Pack Ambusher, a 4/4 wolf with flash. The flash is completely irrelevant because it's just going to be randomly summoned at sorcery speed from the Momir Vig Cube. Other wolves and werewolves you control get +1/+1. At the beginning of our end step, if we didn't cast a spell this turn, we create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. So this is another one of those creatures that will really challenge you to think, do I summon something from the cube, or do I build up my hand? Do I build up my land base and just get a 2/2 chump blocker for the time being? Night Pack Ambusher will fall into that list of creatures that isn't automatically going to be sent into combat, and it's going to help challenge the way you think about approaching whether or not you want to summon a creature this turn from the cube, or if you want to take that turn off to try to shore up something else. All right, MTGBC, that will do it. That's 20 more creatures into the Momir Vig Cube with a CMC of 4. Let me know which are your favorites in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.